Hey YouTube, this will be the first ever video on my channel. Chances are you might be watching a few years from now to see where I started from. Or maybe you're watching this in 2025 and with a bit of luck and persuasion, I could convert you to one of my first subscribers. Today I want to make a small diorama using these filament LEDs. I got them for Christmas and I've been brainstorming small projects I could incorporate them in. The most obvious idea that came to mind was turning it into some sort of laser bolt, but it's way too long and floppy for that. We can't have our sniper shooting out a wet noodle, as it's just not going to look that good. This is pretty much the same for all of my figures. We could use it in this big sandcrawler I have, but one, it's going to take me a while to paint, and two, I think a blue laser would much better suit that aesthetic. But then I found this guy, and instantly had the idea of him shooting this massive arc of green energy upwards like this. Space Marines are also pretty simple to paint, and I've had these sitting around for a while. In fact, if you have any ideas for these other figures, or really any of my collection, feel free to join the Discord server where we can chat about diorama ideas. Now we've got a basic idea, we can start painting. This figure had already been primed and given a base coat of Calador sky, so I really just needed to work out the details and cleaning it up. Oh, and before I forget, I printed this small base earlier on my 3D printer. I'm planning to fit a switch in it so I can easily toggle the filament on and off. I'm not following a specific paint scheme, as if you're a fan of Warhammer, you know you could easily get lost in all of the different factions and clans, but here's one I painted last year, which I'm probably going to copy. After I picked up a brush, I could start cleaning up the base coat of the figure. In fact, let's just call him Dave. I wanted to make sure that there weren't any black spots on Dave, because there'll be a pain to work on later. I then got some Xandri dust for his belt, and just began to blot out some of the details. It wasn't easy, let me tell you, but before you know it, I was working on his purity seal, so at least Dave will be safe from demons from now on. After that, I could do Dave's gun. The paint was a bit watery because I hadn't opened it in months, so it did take a good few coats, but I think it turned out great. And the rest was just using some bronze paint for the detailing of the armor and Dave's insignia. Oh, and before I forget, I did his eyes as well. Now, to finish a paint job like this, you do have a few options. You could leave it, but I want Davey Boy to look a bit worn and a bit battle weary. I have two paints that could do this, Agrax Earthshade and Skink Blue. Agrax makes the figure look muddied and dirty like this one, but I do think that's a bit too extreme for Dave, so we'll be dry brushing him with Skink Blue to give a bit more of a scratched effect. But I won't do anything too extreme, just add a little bit to make him more realistic. And with that done, we can move on to the fun bit, the laser. Now, I'm no electronics expert, but I have already made one thing with these LEDs before, and it's this, my Mickey graffiti art thing. I don't really know what to call it, but if you look closely, it has 4 individual filament LEDs inside it, 2 per $sign. And this was pretty damn complicated to solder together. All the electronics had to fit inside this frame. The LiPo battery I was using was supplying too much current, so then I had to limit it with 4 10 ohm resistors, all the while soldering it all on my bedroom floor at 4 o'clock in the morning. But honestly, it was worth it, even with the mess of wires at the back. What I'm trying to say is that just putting the filament on top of the Space Marine won't be enough. We'll need some sort of power source, and if we're choosing a battery, then we'll need a way to charge said battery, and then are we going to fix the LED's brightness with a set resistance, or are we going to be fancy and add a variable resistor and make the circuit even more complicated? All of this was going through my mind when I was deciding what I wanted to do, and then it hit me. What if instead of doing all those fancy shenanigans, I directly powered it with a DC outlet adapter? That way I could keep the circuit ridiculously simple, and I wouldn't have to worry about jamming everything into the tiny base I'd printed. To hold the filament up so it looked like a laser, I used some thin copper wire that I could bend into shape to get the perfect angle. I had a mate give me this absolutely massive spool a couple years ago, so if you're watching this, Phoenix, thanks bro, you can see I'm putting it to good use. Although, knowing me, it'll probably take me like 2 decades to finish it. I could then solder the wire to the contacts of the LEDs, fix it with some hot glue, and then bend it so that it was hidden from the front. I'm not the best at soldering, so I wanted to check whether all the contacts were good, so I went to plug it in, and the lights didn't turn on. The current rating was quite high, so I decided to add a few resistors and see whether that would change anything, and lo and behold, it worked perfectly. I then decided to hide the copper wire more by colouring it in with a black Sharpie. I left the base blank for now rather than adding a texture like this figure because I thought it matched what I'd 3D printed better. This is what it looks like now, but there were still a few more things I wanted to do. In fact, I don't even need a switch anymore, so while I work on fixing this hole, let me tell you about the plans for this channel. I'll be uploading a video weekly, and they should all really be done in this style. However, as I progress, I'll be attempting more complex and finished projects. I'll be scouring charity shops here and there, but as we know, any hobby with miniatures, especially Warhammer, can get expensive fast. So every piece I make from now on will be available for sale. Just DM me on Instagram or any socials, and they'll always be linked below for your benefit. And if you want your name displayed in every video from now on, just like this, consider supporting me on Patreon, as all supporters will get their names displayed each week. Now I've fixed the hole and I still have a lot of stuff to say, I'll add some footage of me painting other random figures in the background. At this point, I doubt I'll be getting monetized very quickly, but anything I make will be going right into supplies and equipment. I've ordered some more filament LEDs, but they'll take a while to get here, and I'd love any ideas that would include them. Oh, and before I forget, all the materials I'm using will always be linked below for ease of use. Whether it's the paint I have or where I got my wires from, you'll be able to find them in the description, and hopefully if you'd like to, you'll be able to follow along with my videos. Wow, okay, that was a mouthful. Honestly, I've just kind of said all that as a reminder for myself and what I'll be doing in future videos, so feel free to subscribe if you don't want to miss any exciting uploads. Now there's only really one thing left to do, and that's to fix up these two ends. They look untidy, and it's also really fiddly to fit it into the end of my plug. So what I'm going to do is 3D print a small adapter I designed. I need thicker electrodes like these, but I couldn't find any, so I'll just solder together bundles of copper wire and crimp the ends so that they fit perfectly. I added some hot glue and then I plugged it in, and I realized that nothing turned on. And I'm going to be honest, that one stumped me. However, I noticed that this light on the plug was going out, which meant that the circuit must be shorting out somewhere. So I cut my adapter in half and found 2 wires that had crossed over, and because they went from the positive terminal and they were instantly going to the negative, it was causing the adapter to short out. So I cut them and glued it all back together. And finally, after all that hard work, everything turned on. So now it's done. I think it's time for one final montage.